The name of this session is After the Choice, Post-Abortion Healing. This is Renee Gibbs, and we are in room 31 at 4 o'clock on Friday.
Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to see you here. I was happy that I was able to present this workshop to you and to see people coming for this very important topic. I wish that everybody at the conference could watch this. At the seminary where my husband taught for many, many years, we would show it. And then again, my goal there was for the students and the deaconesses and the pastors to be able to see what we're going to see today, and then to be able to better be able to care for the men and women involved in abortion. And my main goal is to just expose you, and the women on the video that we're going to see will do that for me. I don't need to tell you tons and tons of stories because they will. And then we'll talk about ways that we can help and get a little more information and answer some questions, especially about how the church can be involved and how women even feel about the church. The first time I saw this movie, I was with teenagers. I was the advisor for a Teens for Life group, and I said, wow. And that was my first exposure. It opened my eyes. We took it and showed it at the high school many times, about every 4 years, so every kid would get exposed to it, and at the seminary every year. And the first time we showed it, I put it in the daily announcements just to let people know, invite them to the movie. And a seminary wife called me and she said, "It's great you're doing that. I just want to let you know that I'm in the movie." And so I said, okay, yes, abortion is everywhere. It's in the church, so why wouldn't it be here on our campus? And in fact, one year, one of my friends who was a student wife said that she knew of 8 post-abortive couples that were there on campus. And that's just the ones that self-identified to her. And so it's a phenomenon we hear about it in the news, but we don't really talk about it in the church. And we really need to, because even in this room, I'm sure there is somebody who's post-abortive. I'm sure more than one. And or your sister, your daughter, your mother, your friends. And it affects us, and we need to talk about it. The Scarlet Letter A, when the book was written, we all know about the witch trials for adultery, but this Scarlet Letter A for abortion is equally shunned in our voices. In fact, one of my friends, Jim Lamb, the executive director for Lutherans for Life, when he was the former one, when he was a parish pastor, one of his women met him in the parking lot and said, "Pastor," and she confessed her abortion to him. She said, "I had to tell you out here because it's too dirty to talk about in the church." So what did he do? He marched her in up to the altar, gave absolution to her. Another pastor that I know, one of his women one of the teachers in his church said he could just tell by her countenance. And he was brave, and he said, "Well, when did you have it?" And she was able to confess her abortion, and he brought her through healing steps, and then he said, "Now your job is to go and help others." And they started a healing ministry in their church. So as you watch it, and you'll hear the stories of the ladies, and I always preface it to say, it's an old movie, but it's the best one I've seen. So the hairstyles may look a little bit off, but the stories are still the same, and the methods are still the same as well. So let's watch this, and when I do it, some of the people say, "Well, you should have brought Kleenex." So I'll pass my Kleenex around. If anybody needs it, pass it up and down the aisles if you're one who might need that. And then we'll stop and talk.
seemed like the more I asked him to stop, the more forceful he got. And before I knew it, my dress was torn and I was being raped and I was thrown out of the car.
The doctor looked at me and said, "Congratulations, you're pregnant." And I was only 17.
It seemed like the very worst thing that could happen to anyone. And it happened to me.
I told the boy first, and all he could say was, "I can't tell my parents, I can't tell my parents."
I couldn't believe I was pregnant. I just could not fit this into my life.
When I saw my daughter kicking and sucking her thumb and they gave me a picture, that's when I went home and actually believed I was pregnant.
I was trying to find a shirt that would hide my quickly growing stomach so that my mother and my friends would not know the fact that I was pregnant.
My mom, she almost fainted, and my dad, he couldn't say anything. He just looked shocked.
Her reaction to me was, "No, you're not going to have a baby. There's too many things that lie ahead of you. I have a lot of goals and a lot of dreams for you. You're only 17, so you are going to have an abortion."
It never even occurred to me, was it a child, was it a baby? It was just, I don't want to be pregnant, and that's all that was in my face.
I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't married.
I've gotten myself into this situation. Now I will get myself out.
One part of me really wanted to have that baby, and another part of me would say you can't.
So I wanted to go in and have this abortion as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible, and get on with it.
I totally denied that it was a baby. I didn't even think the word baby. All I knew was I was pregnant, and I didn't want to be pregnant.
I believed once it was over I would be back to who I was before.
It was not a baby, it was not a child. It was just a mass of tissue that you just go in. It's not even formed. Just go in and have it taken out. There's no problem with that.
Okay, if I can't take care of the baby, somebody else can. But I wouldn't do that. I was just too selfish to do that.
I thought this thing inside of me, it had no right to be there. I didn't ask it to be there. It made me angry. And I can remember walking around all day thinking, well, who is more important, this thing or me? And I thought me.
The way that I explained it to my dad was that I was going to a funeral that day, and so I couldn't, go to work.
You're sitting in the waiting room, and that whole time I was just frightened. I was terrified. My heart was going 100 miles an hour, and I didn't want to be there.
And I was there in this frame of mind of, this is what I have to do, it's my only choice.
I was 18 weeks pregnant with my baby and was told that I would have to have a saline abortion. The doctors told me that there was just nothing but a mass of tissue in my womb, and that later on in the evening after the procedure I would deliver nothing but a mass of tissue.
Up to the very moment I had my abortion, I was trying to think of a way out, and there was just nobody there to help me.
You're gonna go through with this, it's too late now to say no, you just gotta go through with it.
They were trying to assure me that it was right, but in my heart I knew it was wrong.
I can remember this like it was yesterday, sitting there and just deciding within myself, no, I gotta go. And the minute it was just like my heart was pounding out of my chest, and at that very same split second, a voice said, "Carol, come this way."
I touched my stomach and I said, "Please forgive me. Please forgive me for doing this."
Once they laid me down, I knew, no, I can't do this, I want to go. And they said, no, you need to lay down, and I didn't want to, and they came with a shot and gave me a shot, told me that would calm me down. It didn't, it had just the reverse effect, so they strapped me down to this table.
I was on the table and I grabbed my sister and she held my hand, and I
guess I also cried for my sister because she had to witness such an awful thing.
I wanted to run. I felt like I was running, and yet it couldn't make my body go anywhere.
I remember I was crying because I was so afraid, and they were just cold.
I held on to my sister as tight as I could. And there was a sound that was incredible. It was like a 747 coming through the building.
That's one thing that I do very much remember, is the sound of that vacuum thing starting.
You could hear pieces being suctioned. You could hear tissue. You could hear it.
It's a horrible sound. I wanted to take my hands and put them over my ears, just so I couldn't hear anything.
It wasn't the way anybody said it was.
It felt like my whole lower body was being just completely sucked out of me.
The pinching, the pulling, the pain, I wasn't prepared for that.
I'm always amazed that they say that it's not painful, because it's very painful. I was screaming, I was hollering, I could feel it, and all I knew was that he was not concerned about me.
I could hear them doing an abortion on another girl, and she was crying out for her mom. And the nurse kept saying, "Be quiet, it's almost over."
I ultimately did stop screaming because I fainted.
I felt every part of the procedure, of the vacuum being in there and the suction and the scraping.
It seemed to me that it took a lot of effort for the doctor to get this out of me.
And I just had to will this end, make this end.
The doctor showed no compassion. The nurses showed no compassion. They didn't care. I was in a lot of pain and they didn't care.
This doctor was only interested in doing abortions. It was like women didn't matter to him.
Once you're up on that table and once that machine turns on and that tugging and pulling and ripping from your body is happening, there's no one there but you. You're alone.
The doctor told me that when my daughter would stop kicking, to then push the red button on the wall, and she kicked for over an hour. And that was the hardest part, was to push that red button, because then I knew it was over.
I delivered a perfectly formed baby into a bedpan, and I still remember so well the arms and the legs and the 10 fingers and the burned and reddened dead body of my baby.
It looked just like a little doll. It had a face, it had arms. I remember, the one thing I remember the most is seeing the rib cage, but its legs were gone.
And I looked at the nurse and I said, "That is not tissue, that is a baby." I remember the nurse turning her back on me and walking out the door of the bathroom and leaving me there in horror and in shock almost at what I had just done.
This wasn't a blob, this wasn't a piece of tissue, this was an honest-to-God baby. This was a baby.
The doctor finally came up to where my head was, and he said to me, "I just wanted to let you know that you had twins." And at that point, I knew then that I'd made a grave mistake, and I still feel very sad.
That's my baby. They just put it in the trash right in front of me.
She said, she goes, "I will never ever go through that myself after witnessing that."
I remember when I got down, I could feel blood running down my legs.
And I just had to get out of there as quickly as I could.
The whole place all of a sudden just disgusted me. I wanted to say, "Oh God, please let me back up and do it all over again." But it was too late. Everyone pats you on the hand and tells you you did the right thing. And you go out the back door, because they don't want anyone that's coming in to see what you look like when you're going out. You don't look the same.
And I felt like so distant, like I had no feelings left inside, like somebody tore my soul right out.
And I felt like everyone knew what I had done. and I could hardly face people. I couldn't look at people in the eyes.
Like, not only did they do an abortion on me, but there was definitely part of me gone.
I tried to do everything I could to stop remembering, but I never forgot.
It was not like a doctor's appointment. You walk in, you walk out, you forget. You walk in, you walk out, you remember for the rest of your life, and you're tormented for the rest of your life.
And every time I looked in the mirror, all I could see was a woman who had 2 abortions.
I connect the pain that this overwhelming misery, this deep sense of loss, this deep sense of loneliness with my abortion.
The abortions became so big in my life. It swallowed everything else up.
I would lay in bed at night and I would try to imagine how old those babies would be now and what they would look like and what their names would be, and just the loss that I had. I couldn't get it away. It was like, if only I could bring them back. And I thought maybe in my fantasies I could do that.
I did it. Mom and Dad don't know. My friends don't know. Nobody knows. It's over.
I could not have sat in a room where the word abortion was even mentioned without having to get up and leave.
I wanted nobody to talk about it. It was like a big taboo word. Nobody breathed it, nobody talked about it, nobody, if it came on the TV, I'd turn it.
On one hand, society says it's okay to kill your baby, but on the other hand, they don't want to hear about it. And when they do hear about it, then that puts a whole new light on you as a person.
If I told my friends or my relatives what I saw, what I felt, they would look at me and go, how in the world could you have done that? I've done such a terrible thing. I have such a big secret. What will happen if somebody finds out?
Every time abortion was mentioned, I was just like frozen, and I couldn't speak. I could never tell anybody I had an abortion.
If it's so acceptable and it's so okay, then why is it such a secretive thing?
So I hid that. That was my dark secret that nobody knew. And I wouldn't tell anybody.
When I heard the word abortion, it reminded me of everything that I had gone through. I could hear the sound of that machine in my head. I felt the pain, the shame would come over me, the guilt. I would feel so unworthy.
People would come up to me and say, "Was this your first baby?" And I'd say, "Yes. Yes, it is." But I knew it wasn't.
It was imprisonment. That's the only way I can describe it. It was just, there was not a day that went by that I didn't think of it. And if I didn't think of it consciously, subconsciously it was always there. Always there.
It didn't really hit me in the face until someone showed me a film of the procedure of the abortion. And this little tiny child at 12 weeks, which is when I had my abortion, that's when it hit me. I killed a human being.
I just couldn't wait to look and see what my baby looked like. And I'm flipping through the pages, 11, 12 weeks, that's how far along I was. I was just so excited, and I opened it up to these pictures, and
they showed this beautiful picture of this baby in utero and the little fingers and toes, and it's just so beautiful. And I was thinking, wow, this is great. This baby must be about ready to be born. And the little caption said, 11 weeks.
I was just shocked. I expected to see a blob of tissue.
I just kind of flashed back to my abortion. When I had that abortion, that's what the baby looked like. When they were literally tearing it limb from limb, that's what it looked like.
I kept looking at the pictures and realized what I had done. And I couldn't believe it. Because I was pregnant now with a child that I wanted more than anything in the world. Yet I had thrown my first child away.
I never knew how perfect that baby was when the doctor ripped it from my body.
That was a human being that I killed. That was my child that I decided to kill. It wasn't just a cluster of cells.
up until the moment I saw them throw my baby in the trash. That's when it really hit me.
I had a miscarriage when I was about 10 or 11 weeks along at home, and I was in the bathroom, and I held this miscarriage baby in my hand and realized that it wasn't just a clump of cells, that it was an actual human life that I had killed when I had an abortion.
Once you see reality, once you see the pictures, you can't deny it.
Women go in thinking it's going to be very simple, but how many women leave a clinic with baby parts still inside of them? It happens all the time. They get home and they find out that it wasn't a clean, neat procedure.
If you go in for heart surgery or for a hysterectomy or anything, they give you all the information. And women seeking abortions need to know that this is surgery and it carries risks.
5 weeks after I had my abortion, I was still bleeding. And the bleeding grew heavier and heavier until I ended up in the emergency room because I'd lost so much blood that I couldn't stand up anymore. And the doctor in the emergency room told me that I was pregnant, that they hadn't gotten all of the baby during the abortion.
You're taking a big risk. You really, really are. Because there are a lot of women who, after an abortion, cannot have children anymore. And the ones that I know, they regret it.
When I chose abortion, they never told me that I would be killing the only baby that I would ever conceive. I have never conceived another child since I had my abortion 23 years ago.
They don't tell you about all the risks, the dangers, the emotional trauma. They don't talk about it.
Maybe she's got an infection, maybe she's bleeding, maybe she's got a fever. Who does she call?
And when my abortion went wrong, my doctor abandoned me.
That clinic represented ice cold pain, and there's no way I would have gone back there.
Once the abortion has been performed, you know that that was a life that was taken from you. That no longer will be a cluster of cells. Never, ever again.
I knew when I saw a pregnant woman that that's a baby. There wasn't any question. I mean, you ask a child, what's in that tummy? And the child will say it's a baby.
I wish I would have known that at 18 days, my baby's heart was beating. At 3 weeks, they could pick up brain scans. It's amazing. I could have had an ultrasound done and I could have seen a little picture of my child in the uterus. And at 13 weeks, when I had my abortion, that child would have been fully formed. Everything. But no one said that to me.
I wished and prayed that I would have given my baby a life. Because that was his right to live. I had no right to choose life or death for my son.
It's a decision for a lifetime. You can't go back. And you can never take the memory away.
I justified having my abortion for all these reasons. No education, no money. I wasn't in love with that person. And what I have done is I have committed a murder. I have murdered my own child. And to live with the consequence of knowing you did something to another innocent human being, you killed them before they even had a chance to breathe air, that's something you have to live with, and there's no dealing with it.
I will grow old and I will never have children that will call me mom. I will never have grandchildren that will call me grandma.
And it's gonna be lonely because of one choice.
How do you make the pain go away? They don't give you answers for that.
I always wonder what my life would be like, what my life would have been like had I been brave and kept that child and made the right choices.
You'd think after all those years you would stop thinking about something, but it doesn't go away. Abortion never goes away.
It still hurts when you see a baby. You know, a brand new newborn, and you know that what you killed was just a little bit smaller.
How do you stop hating yourself? They don't have an easy answer for that. So there's a lot of things that they don't tell you.
What can you live with? Can you live with the day-to-day sorrow that you killed a child? I mean, can you live with that?
They will always know that they took the life of their child.
Whether you believe it or not now, you're going to have to live with that decision for the rest of your life.
Nothing will prepare you for how it will feel, because it's not supposed to happen.
Whatever circumstance you go through in caring for this child or putting it up for adoption, whatever emotional hardship that is nothing compared to what you would have to deal with if you had an abortion.
It seems like the world is taken off your shoulders if you make that decision. But trust me, I'm one of the strongest women you could meet. It sticks with you. It will surface somehow, some way. It will come back. I can't lie to you. It's gonna come back.
Don't buy into what the world is telling you, that abortion doesn't affect you and that it isn't a baby that you're killing.
And that's the last person you should blame, is the person inside of you. And it's the last person you should take it out on. And it's the last person that should die for one of your mistakes. Let him live.
You can do this. You can have this child. And you can make good choices. And you can be proud of yourself.
And now I want that secret to be told, to save somebody else from ever making that type of secret for themselves, because it's not worth a secret to carry around for the rest of your life. It's not a good secret. So if I can save somebody from feeling that, I'd be happy. Be merciful to me, O Lord, for I cry to you all day long. For you, Lord, are good and ready to forgive and abundant in mercy to all those who call upon you.
always let the name, excuse me, the names play out to give us a little time to breathe and respect for the women. I want to read Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my voice of my pleas for mercy. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, that you may be feared. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is plentiful redemption, and he will redeem Israel from all his iniquities. The Psalms are a wonderful time. I heard a session this morning on lament. So we can go there and hear that, and I like this because it ends with God's mercy. I want to give you a couple minutes to the person next to you or a couple people. Just respond. And then we'll come back and we can respond as a big group. All right, maybe one more comment in your little group. All right, let's come back together. Would anyone like to share with the big group? Any comments or reactions?
I'll say something. I think it's really important for the church to be willing to have these conversations, because I work in a crisis pregnancy center where, in the state of California, where we have to be really careful about how we talk to our clients because of threats from the government of shutting us down for manipulating women. And so they think that the state of California actually issued a consumer alert to everybody in the state saying that crisis pregnancy centers are false clinics and that we just manipulate women to not choosing abortion. And so all of these stories are so valid, but I sometimes I feel like our hands are kind of tied in the situation that I work in, because it's like they see it as emotional manipulation to tell these kinds of stories. We don't see it that way necessarily. We see it as we want people to know the truth. So we have like an abortion safety checklist, which is more of the, check and make sure that the person you're going to for an abortion has rights at the hospital to admit you. Check and see, can you see their last safety inspection? Things like that, that is more like, medical in that sense. But that's why the church is so important, right? Because those are the places we can be very free to have those conversations. And it might be different in different states, but because of the way that things are set up in California,
right,
these kinds of stories don't get told very often.
What's crazy is you said emotional manipulation, where what they were talking about was also emotional
Right.
manipulation by
right.
the doctors themselves.
Absolutely, 100%.
So I'm
not saying I agree with it. I'm saying that's how the outsiders see what we do.
Yeah, it's just interesting because then the government of California is saying that's what you're doing, but then that's also what those doctors and nurses are doing by not letting them get up, not letting them. That's just.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, I have a story that has a little bit different ending, but nevertheless, it was very difficult to navigate. 13 years ago, my niece came to mine and my husband's home, and she was very close with one of my daughters. And my daughter came to us and she said, I want you to know that when Chloe comes to visit, she's pregnant, but you guys aren't supposed to know about it because she just didn't want anyone to know. So anyway, she made us promise we wouldn't say anything to her, and my husband and I said, well, we can't promise you that. If Chloe wants to talk about it, we'll let her. And that night at the supper table, at the very end of the meal, Chloe started crying. And she told us all that she was pregnant and that her mom had scheduled her for an abortion. And she was scared, and we shared with her God's word and prayed with her, and she went home and she would not have that abortion. And we bore the wrath of her mother very deeply. I mean, she called us every name in the book, but now as it stands today, there's a 13-year-old young man named Kipton, and it's the only child that Chloe has. She married a man that has done a lot of steroids and different things and hasn't been able to conceive. So God knew about this.
Yeah.
And we had an ending that was good.
Well, thank you for your for your loving on your niece and caring for her. So
I think to comment about we need to talk about this at church. I shared with these two ladies here that it's been several years ago, but there was a couple in our congregation who came to me and said their daughter had end-stage lung cancer, and she hadn't been in church forever. I didn't know the woman, and asked me if I would talk to her. And I'm, well, is she okay with that? And she's like, oh yeah, we told her about you. Okay. Well, we sort of developed a very quick rapport, and she told me that she had had an abortion when she was a senior in high school. No one knew about it. She had never told anybody. And she had been diagnosed with lung cancer early on, and did not treat it because she, all those years, this is how long lasting the ramifications of her abortion were for her. All those years, that's why she dropped out of church. That's why, because she had done something so horrible God could never forgive her. And so she thought this cancer was something she deserved. And she did die from it, but she chose not to treat her cancer because she felt like this was punishment from God for the sin of that abortion all those years ago, and she had carried that with her entire life. And she was 53 or 54 at the time that we met. And you know, for her to have come away from church as a senior in high school to think that somehow that was an, you know, of course it's a sin, but she had it in her head that it was, that God could not ever forgive that. And you know, and it was just a privilege to walk with her back to the cross. And I'm gonna cry, but I can't really tell the story, but she I have no doubt when I get there that she'll be there.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for loving her. Who needs a handout? The media is not telling the story. We have plenty.
Oh, we do.
The media is not telling the story. Well, not telling the true story. We have plenty. I've got more right up here. Yeah, I want you to be able to take this home. There's some good things, and we'll go over this. Anybody else need one? You guys. Have plenty. Everybody set. Good. Before I forget, I've got DVDs here of the movie, or you can watch it on YouTube. They used to not allow it on there, but the whole thing is YouTube on After the Choice. So whatever your preference is, if you'd like to be able to show that to somebody else. And you never know, like your church youth group. When we showed at the high school, we do it, not that many of them are post-abortive, but so that they see the story, so that they don't take their friend for an abortion, so that they can be aware that, and at a Lutheran high school, you're able to do that, so they can get the facts, because in some of the research, 90% of the women say they were not given the facts, 90% of post-abortive women. And if they had known this, I think 70 or 80% of them would not have gone through the procedure. And so they're told it's quick and easy, like going and getting your tooth pulled, you know, walk in, walk out, and not all the other ramifications. So let's talk about some of those. In fact, even in counselors, I go down and pray in front of Planned Parenthood, and I met a woman, Aletha, down there, and she was post-abortive, and I noticed her necklace. She had a tiny little baby ring on a necklace, and I asked her about it, and she told me her story. And she said that when she was having difficulty dealing with it, her counselor had said, oh, just go take a cruise. Like, that'll get you over it. That'll get your mind off of it. You know, and the book that I really love and want to reference to you is called Forbidden Grief, The Unspoken Pain of Abortion by Teresa Burke. And Dr. Burke, when she was going through her training in counseling, or I'm not sure what her degree is, but I know she's a PhD, she had a group of 8 women that were there for eating disorders, and she was helping them through the eating disorders. And in the book she describes one of the sessions where it came out that one of the women was post-abortive, and it turns out 6 out of the 8 women were post-abortive, but they were there for eating disorders, so it's undiagnosed. And when she took the information to her supervisor and said, look at this, this is astounding, we've got to consider this, he wrote her off and he said, no, there's no connection. He said, you just need to drop it. He said, this is a support group for eating disorders, not abortion. And he instructed her not to bring the subject up again. So here her supervisor in counseling, maybe what's his story? Everybody's got a story. And when you hear people that are so ardent on the other side, have compassion for them. They're not our enemies. We need to know, for some reason, they are that strongly pro-abortion. So we need to love them and try to understand. And maybe, like in these two cases, have a chance to find out what people's stories are. And so, let's just go through this. And I love interaction, so if you have comments, because I know you all have various things, and they kept reminding me our clock is 5 minutes early. So if you're a clock watcher, if you need to get out when it says 5:30, go, and who knows how long we might finish before that. Depends how hungry we get. But for us to understand, someone read that first paragraph for me, save my voice. Sherry?
Yeah, I'll read it. Abortion is a life event that may cause adverse emotional reactions. One may report symptoms of post-traumatic stress, anxiety or depression. Post-traumatic stress symptoms and their impact are often denied. Its onset often delayed, and its symptoms often triggered by related or seemingly unrelated events or stimuli. Number one, a wide range of effects occur, including fear, guilt, grief, depression, anxiety, or feelings of helplessness, lowered self-concept, self-destructive behaviors, or suicidal urges. Symptoms can occur anywhere from a few hours to many years after an abortion.
Pause right there.
Sure.
When you notice the video, were these young women? No, kind of middle-aged, a little bit older. So it took them a while maybe to process. And you can still see how strong their feelings were when their abortions were many, many years earlier. There, Lutherans for Life has a quote in this booklet, and if you haven't stopped by their display, they have many good resources. One woman wrote, I'm 95 and I've lived with my abortion experience for 55 years. I am afraid that this sin is just too great. Can God ever forgive me? So a 95-year-old woman is still carrying this. And my husband's aunt had an abortion when she was young, and she had a lot of health issues, and the doctor had recommended it. And about when my mother-in-law was 85, she knew I did a lot of things in the life arena. And I said something about maybe going to the March for Life or something. And she said, I'd never seen her react like this. She said, got very angry. I just wish they would stop talking about it. My sister had to have the abortion. They said she was going to die. It's like, whoa. So my mother-in-law was carrying this for 65 years, 70 years, that pent up anger in her. Now, so obviously she's not dealt with it. My sweet aunt, she had dealt with it, and she worked in a pregnancy center. So she had come to grips, and I don't know if the women ever talked, but it shows how deep down this is and how she was defending her sister from long, long ago. And the average age when the average time between their abortion and the time when they really start regretting is 7.5 years. A comment?
I was just, if I don't take very long, may I share my story?
Please.
I'll stand so you don't have to turn. I'm a missionary kid, so grew up in the church. And when I was 18 years old, I got pregnant, and I had an abortion, and it was horrific. I would have done anything to have hidden this from the whole world. I would have rather died than anybody know about it. I married that man to try to make it right, and I spent 30 years in a miserable marriage to try to punish myself. But you just can't ever punish yourself enough, or hard enough, or good enough. And I've always loved Jesus my whole life, and I really slayed myself when I took the life of my son. I knew it was a boy. I decided to not have children. I didn't want to have children to try to punish myself enough. And everyone would always say, oh, you're going to make the best mama. You would be such a good mama. And it wasn't until God reminded me of the story of the talents in the Bible and the man who took his talent and buried it under the ground. And I realized what I had done and that I was in rebellion against God and his plan for me. So I submitted myself to the Lord and said, I will take whatever children you will give me as long as they might love you and never dishonor your name. So my 2 children are sitting in this back row right here, my 16-year-old daughter and my 14-year-old son. I just want to tell you that her name is Annika. It means favored grace, and grace is God's undeserved gift to me. I do not deserve to have children. And her middle name is Grace. And this is my son. When he was in my belly, the doctors diagnosed him with a cleft lip, and they wanted to do an abortion. They told me that he had extra fingers and extra toes and other things that were wrong with him, but God gave me another chance to have a son and to say no to abortion. And I didn't deserve that extra chance, but he gave it to me anyway. His name is Gray, which is grace with the C pulled out, because he's God's undeserved gift to me. I just wanted to share that hope. And I knew when I held that child, my firstborn, in my arms, that I would have to tell her what I had done. And so I waited, and 3 years ago on Valentine's Day, I took them out and we got all dressed up very fancy to a fancy restaurant. And I told them about the story, and all their lives I'd prepared them to have a tender heart towards women who faced abortion, and a tender heart towards babies. And I told them all their lives that someday I would tell them something and they had the right to decide if they would forgive me or not. And they sat there and they forgave me. And so every Valentine's Day, we just had it. We celebrate their brother. And it's very special. And so God does use everything for good. He promises to, and he does. And this is such a blessing. Praise God that he turned my life around. So nobody knows. Now you all know. So thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you for sharing. Often when we're doing this at the seminary, women will come forward, and I can remember Stacy. She said, "This is the first time I've ever told anybody besides my husband and my brother." So she was brave, and so thank you. Thank you. And what is your name?
My name is Greta.
Greta.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story, which is so, so precious. So women need to know they can share their stories, that they won't be condemned. But unfortunately, very few of them share them with anybody. Not in the church. Less than half the women say they know that they've told anybody at church. Less than half the women think they can go to their pastors. Like 65% of the people think that their church would be condemning of them because they've heard rumors. Oh, so-and-so's single and they're pregnant. So they hear this. So why would I go and expose myself to that condemnation? You heard the women saying, if anybody knew, what would they think of me? So we've got a double standard because we say all legally, and now it's really the country's up in an uproar over this, that it's legal in many states, and yet they don't want to talk about it. In fact, at one march, there was a pro-abortion march in D.C., and the women were kind of holding signs, about being proud of their abortions. And one woman who was holding a sign, she finally threw her sign down and she left because she was not proud of her abortion. And she went over, and the life-affirming people embraced her. And she passed somebody, she said something, I just feel too bad about it. And another pro-abortion survivors said, well, we all do, we just hide it. So many on that side think they can't admit it because either the bad rap, it's too horrible, or it's a double standard because they're not admitting. And in fact, a lot of abortion centers have called Lutherans for Life because their women are coming back after their abortions needing counseling, and they called us for resources for them. But they don't tell them that up in front. In fact, the counselors are kind of instructed to say, to not tell them all the facts because they don't want to create fear. Like it would be worse for them to be thinking about that it might be bad. So it's kind of a double standard. And I know a lot of people there obviously really believe in what they're doing, but you all have heard of Abby Johnson and other clinic workers who have seen, finally their eyes are open and seen what's going on, and they change their minds. And then in Abby's case, she was embraced by those in the Life community, and now she's speaking all over and telling her story. Okay, keep going, Sherry.
3, not all women experience all reactions, and not all women have severe reactions. Number 4, many women are in serious denial of what happened and are seeking counseling for symptoms such as anxiety, depression, parenting, or marital problems.
Right. And this delayed trauma, delayed really makes it misunderstood of why they're dealing with these things. Well, let's keep going. This next stat, who are the women? And it says statistics show that up to 24 to 35% of U.S. women ages 15 to 44 have had at least one abortion. And that's actually gone down. I used to say 35 to 43%. So these are all slippery figures. I don't know who is doing that. In fact, what?
Not all reported.
Exactly. A lot of women lie about this when they're asked. Same thing, they can't admit it, even admit it to themselves.
Well, and also if you can get Plan B from a vending machine in your dorm room, they don't, a lot of, those are pregnancies that may have occurred that never ended up being carried through, but they just disappear.
I know, and I'm so glad you brought that up because this is just surgical abortions.
Right.
The ones you heard about, saline and vacuum abortions. But this is not the chemical abortions.
Walgreens selling over-the-counter
the abortion pill,
the actual,
which isn't even Plan B. That's even a step further.
Yeah, that is for when you're further along, not just your emergency contraception to prevent implantation.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And so think of these women, when they used to do RU486, you had to see a doctor, they get the shots, make 2 trips to the clinic, and then you would have the abortion at home in your toilet. But about at least 5% of those people ended up in needing to see a doctor again because it was not clean. So think of the women having these little, even a 12-week-old, is about this big. And if you're having, this abortion in your toilet, and then the woman is horrified when she sees that it's not just a menstrual period, not just a blob, but it actually has hands and head. And then what does she do? Flush it in the toilet? Think of emotionally. I'm just thinking about that as these women were talking about them throwing the babies away. Here she's actually flushing it down and things. So you want to, that's why I cry. That women are going through this, that they're being, lied to in that way. Keep going, Sherry, you're a good reader.
Okay. So who are the women who have abortion statistics show that up to, you already said that, didn't you? Never mind. Number one, he may be dealing with this as his first major crisis in life, or she may have had a life filled with crisis and trauma since early childhood. He may be a Christian, 70%, or she may have never heard of Jesus as her Savior. He may have been an LCMS member all his life. 27% attend church weekly. Or his dad may be a pastor or a church leader. He may have been life affirming all his life.
I'm sorry, that's really awkward, isn't it?
I mean, especially in our current era.
I'm going to change this next time, yes.
Well, all right, I'm just going to say she, but you know that we're feeling for the guys too. She may have been life affirming all her life.
Yeah, let's pause right there. I wanted to make a couple comments. As far as being a church leader, I've had women come to me whose fathers are church leaders or pastors in our congregation in Oregon where Joe served. 2 young women aborted their babies while they were in high school. One's father was the head of the president of the congregation, the other was the head of the elders. And I think the mothers took them, and I don't think the dads ever really found out. So here, even within a family, you've got secrets and pain, like why is my daughter crying all the time? And nobody knows. And so, then as far as life affirming, there's a high percentage of people who are, it said 70% of the women undergoing abortion believe abortion involves the killing of a human life. And 30 to 60% were initially happy about being pregnant and enjoyed being pregnant. As many as 60 to 80% would actually have preferred to give birth if only their circumstances had been better. And so our goddaughter, Sarah, was pregnant. Her dad's a pastor. And she had an abortion procedure scheduled. And I had sent her a birthday card. And it happened to be, had a little baby on the return sticker. And she's got that and she saw that and she said, I can't do it. So our little things, you never know what one little word or encouragement or acceptance. And now her son is 18, awesome, graduating this year. And so it's in our community, it's in our churches. These numbers are about the same. And you'd think, how can that be? How can as many people in the Lutheran Church abort as outside, as those who haven't been taught about life? So I don't have all the answers. We need to do some talking about this. We need to do teaching. We need to be communities that love and that say bad things happen, but we're going to love. We're going to get through this together. I can remember when we had little toddlers, my husband and I, little kids, they were all preschoolers, and we're in bed one night, and he says, well, probably one of our kids is going to get in trouble, get pregnant or something. And here, the oldest is 5, and I about fell out of the bed while he said that. I said, what? Aren't our kids all going to be well-adjusted and never having problems? But he was setting me up to know, okay, we live in a fallen world, and some of our kids are going to fall. So let's be ready. And he said, but we will love them. We will get through this. So parents need to communicate that to their kids ahead of time. And it's not like if I say, okay, if you get pregnant, we're going to love you. Not like I'm giving you permission, but somehow to say, we love and care and forgive each other, and we do life together in that way. Read the quote on number 6, Sherry.
Frederica Matthews Green is quoted as saying, no one wants an abortion. She wants an ice cream cone or a Porsche. She wants an abortion as an animal caught in a trap and wants to gnaw off its own life.
Yeah. Yeah. I've read that quote three different books. So why do they abort? They feel a lot of pressure. I had one seminary wife who aborted say that pressure from the Concordia University where she attended, and she was going to lose her scholarship. So wait, this is our schools. What are we doing? They think they can't afford it. Maybe they have other children and they can't imagine being responsible. Single parenting or thinking they're too young. She doesn't want anyone to know she's had sex or that they're having an affair. And I think that number 8 is really big. They couldn't, the social acceptance that this is a woman's right and as a form of birth control. All right, let's keep going. Maybe domestic violence. Or rape. And this, I've heard that only 1% of the abortions are due to rape, but then I was reading, I think this meant like 30% of women in our country have either been raped or assaulted. And so I think that's a higher number, but not that many abortions are because of rape. Very, very low number. So, and finally, it's slippery slope, selective reduction. Now with all our technologies, like in vitro fertilization, where they implant 4 or 5 embryos, hoping that one will stick, will implant and live. Then if maybe several, then the doctor wants to come in and remove some of the extras, so that they're that the other babies have more chance of surviving rather than you having quadruplets or triplets and things. Or they suspect a disability. With all our testing these days, if, like you said, a baby had a cleft palate, I mean, what a crazy.
You never see cleft lips anymore. I had a nurse friend say, "Oh, you just don't see that anymore." I'm like, "That's right, because they're being aborted. It's a lip. It's a palate."
It can be easily repaired. I mean, obviously, you don't see very many children with Down syndrome because about 90 or 95% of them are being aborted. And in Iceland, they're very proud. I think there's only been 2 born lately because they've eliminated that disease. Well, those children, so they would still be having, the same number of conceptions. So, and our son and his wife were both found to be carriers of cystic fibrosis. And the doctor wanted to do testing to see if, when they were pregnant, if the baby had CF. And they said, we're not even going to go there, because obviously we're not going to abort if he or she has it. The next part, the physical, I think we've heard a lot about this. There's a connection with breast cancer and abortion. Look at number 5, infertility rate increases, and miscarriages and premature future babies being born. So you're not just hurting that child, but impacting your other pregnancies. Yes?
One of the things I learned at Choices here in town was that if a woman comes in abortion-minded, they're going to keep loving her no matter what, but they'll say, if you decide on an abortion, we'll do STD testing for you because Planned Parenthood won't. And if they do have an STD and have an abortion, then their chance of being sterile from an infection goes way up. And you're never going to hear that from Planned Parenthood.
No, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Wait, Planned Parenthood won't do STD testing?
Not here.
Oh, wow.
Or not on pregnant women.
Not on pregnant women, not pre-abortion, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought that was one of the services.
Yeah, no. But if you're coming in, they're not going to do it prior to abortion. So that's one of the things that we are doing.
Yeah.
Just to kind of try and keep them
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, we heard a lot of these grief and remorse. There was you put a note in a bottle and put it in the water. So somebody found a bottle, and the note said, "Dear baby Edgar, I had to give you up through abortion." So somebody's heart was broken when they wrote the note and put it in the bottle. And other times, you may have seen cross displays in schools or churchyards representing the number of abortions in a certain period of time. So sometimes on those, people will come at night and write notes to their babies, and then they're found the next. So they're still dealing with that. A lot of women after their abortion get pregnant again, like 29% get pregnant within the first year to try to have a makeup baby. But unfortunately, many of those babies, the problems haven't changed, so maybe those are aborted as well. And you can go on and on. Drug dependence, alcoholism. Number 7 is interesting. People say to save the relationship, but 66% of relationships ended within a month of the abortion. So maybe the guy is saying, have the abortion, or we're through with. Well, either she's angry at him, or he maybe says, dodge that bullet. And so the abortion doesn't help the relationships in most cases. Let's go on to the spiritual. I want to make sure we have that. You heard some of these things. The unforgivable sin, withdrawing from church. As you said, with that example we heard, the shame. One pastor friend of ours had a miscarriage, and he said they were dealing with it because how hard it was because they'd had an abortion, and they felt that God was punishing them for that. Emotional triggers. We also, I guess the video had a lot of that as well. Mother's Day celebrations. Life-affirming sermons. A lot of post-abortive women won't go to church on either Life Sunday or Mother's Day. They just can't face it. I even read somebody's monthly periods reminded them of that. So every month they were reminded. And men, got to talk about the men. Here's the stats. 42% of the men encouraged the women to abort. So that's pretty high. 31% leave it up to them, and 27% say they tried to prevent it. Do you know that men have no right, even if you're married, your wife could abort, which is pretty crazy in our country. But it's women's body, women's choice. And then they feel, when the men either encourage it or they don't stick up for the women, then they are just further piling onto the women. Some of the men, either if they were on the side that they encouraged it, then later on it might be feeling like I'm a loser and a failure when it counted most, protecting his baby, because that's what men are kind of wired to do, to procreate and to protect and to love their families. It can make future relationships all the harder for them, for men and women. Finally, alienation from God. Number 8, unable to go to his heavenly Father when he didn't protect his own son or daughter. So how do we change this? How do we create a life-affirming culture? And a counselor gave me these kind of simple steps: recognize, receive, and release, to help women recognize what they've done, and that, to be able to talk about it. To understand that her depression or her alcoholism might be caused by other factors such as the abortion. Number 4 is a good one. Acknowledge who her baby is, a human baby who died. And the SEM wife, one of the SEM wives that self-revealed when we had this talk, she said, I couldn't go to one of those healing workshops like Rachel's Vineyard. She said, I couldn't name the baby. Like, she was not ready to fully embrace the humanity of her child yet. She wasn't there. And while I've got this up, the woman who wrote Forbidden Grief started a thing called Rachel's Vineyard, which is healing workshops for women, and then others in the family can go as well, so they can work through this process together and be able to find emotional and spiritual restoration. One of my counseling friends, she starts by asking her people who are in there, just as part of the intake, have you ever had a pregnancy loss, a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or an abortion? So that's how she brings it up. So I thought that's not a bad question for me or for any of us. And people may not, but if we just mention abortion, if we're not scared to say the word, if it's part of our conversation, like if pastors in their sermons or in Bible class, when we're naming sins that we all need to deal with, if abortion's on the list, because they say if you don't even mention it at church, then I know it's not forgivable. Yes?
I do a lot of teaching, and we spoke yesterday on raising godly youth and teens, and just to front end it, teaching our kids about this issue, filling their hearts with our love and the Savior's love, so they're not walking around in the first place with giant holes in their hearts. And then as the church, why is sex the unforgivable sin? We need to address that, because if it was a sin like every other sin, which is an affront to God and needs to be confessed and forgiven, this shame and this hiding and the ramifications of it would not be the same. But in our churches, we're acting like it's the unforgivable sin. And then abortion, this is where it's leading.
Right. Yeah, I worked at a high school, Lutheran high school, and if someone was pregnant, they wouldn't let them go through graduation. And that really bothered me, because are you encouraging them to abort so they can go to the prom and go to graduation? It drove me nuts.
This is all I heard growing up from my missionary parents who gave their lives to the Lord's service. But if there was a girl who got pregnant, how dare they have a baby shower for her? What in the world? And as I said, I would have rather died than have my parents know what I had done. If I thought that there could be forgiveness for me, I knew nothing about grace until I was 30, and now you can see it's everything about my life. But that's because God makes us new people.
Praise God. Yes, He does. Yes, we all need to be made new people. And we all need to approach this and other topics with grace. When you're talking about this in the room, as I started, people in here are post-abortive, so if I come out and say, how could anybody do that? That's so horrible. And I've heard other church leaders say that. You're certainly not going to volunteer your story. No, we have to assume in how we speak with grace. And there's plenty of Bible verses about tempering our tongues and showing God. We are to be the arms of Jesus to each other, because all of us are going to fall one time or another. You can read these things, and I hope you will, as if you are specifically working with somebody on that, or share this with your pastor. And mostly if you can help him or help others in your church understand, maybe get them to watch the video so they get a little understanding. I had one young pastor who had to leave his church because his board of elders and leadership wouldn't let him talk about abortion at all. He said, we don't talk about that here. And he was very life-minded. He just couldn't stay there because he had to talk, because if we don't bring it up, how can we forgive it in that way if it's pushed under there? If someone says, does God forgive abortion? Then, well, why do you ask? Are you contemplating one? If that's the case, let's talk. Let's talk about other options. But if you've had one, that's another story. That's a different answer. So, of course, we know he forgives that as he does other things. And then to be able to be bringing it up in our congregation. Look over on the next page. Let's talk about the rest of us a little bit. When Jeff brought it up, my husband, when he was guest preaching at our church, just mentioned in a list of other sins, 2 women afterwards, when he's walking out and they're shaking hands, they had tears. And he knew they were post-abortive just by their reaction. And it hasn't been talked about a lot in our church. It needs to be brought up more. Under the congregation, helping our people know we're not just against it. Yeah. That we are, as that says under congregation, we're not just against abortion, but against the people who have them. Oh no. If we can just educate, like in your youth groups, talk about it in that way. Yeah, these are kind of good general ideas. And the last part, being a safe place of accepting of hurting people in your congregation. I think we've talked about these, maybe getting some kind of ministry for healing. And Sherry, you were saying here they were starting a Embrace Grace
Yeah, I
group.
was wrong though. That Embrace Grace is a single parent ministry, so they kind of embrace the mom, the single mom as she's pregnant, and then post-pregnant, after she's had the baby, they develop a relationship and mentor and that sort of thing.
But couldn't we have an Embrace Grace for all our messiness?
We could, but that organization here is
Okay.
is different.
A little different, but it's got a cool name.
Yeah, it does.
In that. Yeah. So being a non-anxious presence so that we can bring it up and they won't be shocked. Or when you hear the word, you're not shocked.
I think it's just so important for churches to walk the talk. It's one thing to stand up front and say we are pro-life, we value life, we do this, but then how? I'm so thankful that our church shows that by where we spend our money, how we support families in our church, how we support newborns in our church. And it's just, it drives me nuts when people say that they are pro-life, but then they don't do anything about it. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's probably the biggest thing. And then even for people, women to sit in church who are contemplating or are post-abortive, that they see that this church will be accepting of me because look at what they're doing to help. They're not just saying it, they are actually doing things. Our pastor's daughter was 19 and just had a baby out of wedlock, and it was a very touchy thing, and they were very nervous to tell the congregation, but the congregation just wrapped their arms around our pastor's family and his daughter, and it threw this amazing baby shower for her, and just showed all this love and grace towards her. And that to me showed our church is walking the talk, and they would do that for anyone at our church, and they do that for women at our church. We throw baby showers for everyone at our church. So it's just We need to
Perfect.
do more than just say that we're pro-life. We need to show that we're pro-life.
Yes.
And you guys, your local crisis pregnancy centers are drowning. I guarantee it. And there is not enough money ever to do the stuff that we need to be doing to serve the women that need to be served. And so if you don't feel like you know what to do, call your center and say, well, how can we help? How can we get involved? You know, what are your fundraisers? Can we promote your fundraisers for you? You know, can we throw a baby shower? Can our LWML throw a baby shower? Can, you know, most of your centers will do something called a baby bottle fundraiser where they pass out baby bottles and you give them out to the congregation, they fill them with their change and bring them back. It's super easy. Like, I spend a majority of my time fundraising, even though I really should be spending it on programming with my girls, but it's because there's just never enough. So please
Right.
reach out to them.
Yeah, and also
They do good work.
yeah, pregnancy centers are great places. Many of them have post-abortion healing groups. You may not be able to have it in your own church, but they have it, and they've done programs that they take the women through books like this, Forgiven and Set Free. This is a Lutherans for Life one, Forgiven, from Heartache to Healing. Look at the page 6. I just wanted to show you some of these resources. The Lutherans for Life hotline, crisis pregnancy hotline, is there. It's called Word of Hope, and there to help those that are post-abortive or in crisis pregnancies and things. Some websites: Lutherans for Life, Rachel's Vineyard, which I mentioned, the healing, Silent No More Awareness. This is a group of post-abortive men and women who share their stories, and you can hear stories online. And when I'd go to the March for Life in DC with teenagers, my favorite part was actually standing on by the steps of the Supreme Court after the march, hearing the men and women share their stories. And they'd hold a sign, "I regret my abortion," or "I regret lost fatherhood." And they're very poignant in 3 minutes what they could say. And so if the word can get out, the truth, then that's going to, I'm, showing this, helping people know the truth. Afterabortion.org is a great, many resources. Abortion Changes You, and I didn't put one on there called humanlife.org, and they have a magazine for teenagers, which I don't know if it's right here. Thought I had it. It's hiding for me for a second. Oh, here it is. Just for Girls, or you flip it over, Just for Guys. And so this is kind of on the high school or early college, and it's got all kinds of resources for them that are life-affirming. And notice I'm saying the word life-affirming instead of pro-life, because people think pro-lifers are crazy. They're the lunatics, they're down there protesting, but who doesn't want to be life-affirming and work in the life arena? So not letting them label us with a word, but to kind of change the word to fits more what we like. The video I mentioned, and there's copies there. A few books, you can check those out if you like. One that I didn't mention, the Jericho Plan. This is written for pastors to try to help them in this whole thing, helping women with their healing. And I just talked to them today, and they still have copies of that available. You can look it up. Few things you can do, even wear the little precious feet pin. I didn't put mine on today, unfortunately. Lutherans for Life quotes. But the one thing I want us to close with, since it's time, go back on page 4, and for the church to include this topic in 4 down under B, be a pastor or deaconess. What you could do for the church to include abortion in sermons, in prayers, Bible studies, confirmation, and youth group, naturally when it fits. And so one of my friends who was a pastor wrote this prayer or one similar to it. And every Sunday in their church, under the regular prayers, they prayed this. And he said the whole attitude of the church changed. Because through prayer, this simple little prayer, it was bringing it up every week, different life issues. And the people's hearts got used to hearing it and got used to praying for it. So I'd like us to end this. Maybe we can even read it together as our ending. Gracious Father, author of life, in love protect all unborn children. Guide mothers and fathers into courageous paths of life. Heal the guilt and grant those who are post-abortive. Give comfort to the barren and let us be their true family. As you served us in our weakness, help us to serve the weak, the troubled, and those who approach the end of life. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you so much for coming. I'll be hanging out here if you want to look at any of these things. And thank you for your stories. Really, really beautiful.